Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 27th of February. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with developments surrounding the upcoming visit by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the United States. Immediately after delivering his controversial address to a joint session of Congress this Tuesday, it has been announced that Netanyahu will meet with the Republican and Democratic leaders of the Senate. The closed-door meeting will be held amid escalating tensions between the White House and the Prime Minister's office and will take place between Netanyahu, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Democratic Leader of the Senate Harry Reid. According to a senior official, Netanyahu accepted the invitation in order to continue discussing the unfolding agreement with Iran in a closed-door and bipartisan forum. Earlier this week, senior Democratic Senators Richard Durbin and Dianne Feinstein invited Netanyahu also to a closed-door meeting with party members, separate from his congressional address, although the premier declined that invitation, explaining that accepting it would compound the misperception of partisanship over his slated visit. The White House has decided to send a National Security Advisor, Susan Rice, and Washington's United Nations Ambassador, Samantha Power, to address the annual AIPAC Policy Conference. Rice will be expected to address the deal with Iran during her speech, as well as the crisis in relations with Israel. This past Wednesday, Rice charged that Netanyahu's plan to speak to Congress is destructive to bilateral ties between Jerusalem and Washington. While Rice and Power are high-level officials in the Obama administration, they are not as senior as others who have addressed AIPAC in the past. President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, and Secretary of State John Kerry are among those who have spoken at the conference in previous years. Prime Minister Netanyahu will travel to Washington on Sunday and will address AIPAC on Monday ahead of his speech to Congress on Tuesday. Following this week's comments from Secretary Kerry and Rice questioning Netanyahu's judgment and policy decisions and calling his upcoming congressional speech destructive for bilateral ties, Zionist Union leader Isaac Herzog also criticized the Prime Minister, although the public appears to be mixed over the Prime Minister's handling of relations with the United States.
The comments of both Secretary of State Kerry and National Security Advisor Susan Rice are saddening, are an expression of the crisis in the relationship. We will know together, Mrs. Livni and myself, we will know how to amend and correct the relationship and how to return them back to being intimate, strong, strategic, with full alliance between us and the United States.
I think it's clearly disturbing. However, in my opinion, the security of Israel is paramount. And I believe that it's important for the country to be led by a government that stands up for our security for now and in the future. Having said that, clearly it's disturbing that America, being a very important ally to this country, we need to maintain good relations with that country.
I think it's a terrible mistake. I think it's already done tremendous damage, unprecedented damage. You have members of Congress signing a petition against Israel, in essence. You have members of Congress boycotting the Israeli Prime Minister. These are unprecedented things that will be very difficult to reverse. It's obvious that this is just an election ploy and has nothing to do with the security of Israel.
A preliminary investigation will be opened into alleged financial misconduct at the private and state residences of the Prime Minister, although only after the upcoming elections. That's the decision of Attorney General Yehuda Weinstein, saying that there isn't enough time to complete a probe before the national elections on March 17th, while he stressed that Netanyahu is not suspected of involvement in the alleged misdemeanors. According to a statement from the Attorney General's office, only mild suspicions arose over the testimony from a former employee and initial findings at the official Jerusalem residence and Netanyahu's private Caesarea home. But the state attorney's office believes that the variety of affairs justifies a probe, at the end of which it will be decided whether to launch a criminal investigation. This week's report from State Comptroller Yosef Shapira detailed lavish spending by the Netanyahus at both residences and alleged possible criminal misdeeds. The public is very receptive toward Sarah Netanyahu. This, according to the Prime Minister's wife herself, who spoke out against recent accusations against her in an interview published in today's Jerusalem Post. She directly held the publisher of the Idiot Achronot newspaper, Arnon Moses, responsible for the wave of smears against her and her husband. The interview comes amid reports in The Marker about rising concerns in the Likud party that a tape is about to be released containing a potentially embarrassing telephone conversation that Mrs. Netanyahu had, in which she is heard angrily confronting Monique Ben-Melech after her husband, the former Sderot mayor, Eli Moyal, criticized Netanyahu during last summer's war with Gaza. According to partial transcripts that were printed by Ma'ariv last August, Mrs. Netanyahu is heard accusing Mrs. Ben-Melech of jealousy because her man isn't half the man that Sarah's is. She also reportedly said that only her husband is capable of serving as prime minister, unlike Minister Naftali Bennett and then Minister Yair Lapid, and that he easily could have been the President of the United States if he'd been born there because, she said, the entire world worships him. Former director of the National Security Council, Uzi Dayan, told IBA's Eli Wogelenter that the Prime Minister should speak to Congress because it is in Israel's strategic interest to do anything that it can to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear capability.
First of all, I want to emphasize that what we should do today is prevent Iran from achieving nuclear capability. This is the real threat, and there is it's kind of form of an agreement which will be not only bad but really dangerous to Israel, dangerous to the whole region, actually to the free world, because what they are doing is letting Iran being on the edge of being a threshold country, and at the same time release them from the sanction embargo, so from the sanction regime. So what we should do is prevent Iran from achieving nuclear capability. And I think that preventing Iran from achieving nuclear capability, it's not a politics of election. It's actually a goal, a national security goal, and everybody should be behind it and support, because we have to do it in every form, on every stage. And the Congress is a very good stage to try and explaining to the all communities, especially to the main powers that are negotiating with Iran, that Iran must not remain in that position. We have to kind of push Iran backward, far away from nuclear capability, and not release the sanction, but impose the sanctions, and behind the sanctions should be appointed a gun, a kind of a military strike. If not, the Iranian will get away with it. They say, okay, we'll suffer another 1, 2. Now somebody said 10 years, and then we'll become nuclear, and everybody will respect us. And Iran is not the solution. Iran is the problem in this regional war everywhere. So I think that here in Israel, we should be very careful from a kind of a policy which rely on, which is called in Hebrew smoch al. This policy of smoch, what they say? They say we should trust Obama. Obama will trust the Iranians, and the Iranians will trust what? And we trust nuclear capability. So this is a vicious circle that we should avoid, and we should go everywhere and kind of saying, be careful, this is not what we want to get, and we have to do it everywhere, every place, every a good stage can serve it, including, of course, the Congress in Washington.
One of the criticisms about it on a practical level is that the Congress was close to overriding the veto that Obama said he was going to do on the sanctions bill, and now, because of his speech, it's pushed them further away, and there'll be no overriding the veto.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, it's legitimate to come with different opinion on it. But if the Americans and other, I mean, the United States of America and other European countries were serious about it, we should have an agreement with Iran by now. This agreement would have said we don't release the sanction unless you get rid of the centrifuges, we dismantle the nuclear heavy water reactor, and we want to impose international kind of looking or seeing that Iran is actually fulfilling that agreement. If it was done in that way, with sanction and with a pointed gun, I think that we could have had an agreement right now. The reason that there is no agreement, that the Iranians are so stubborn and don't cooperate without it, it's because they think they can get away with it, and this is what the Congress should think about.
How would an agreement between Washington and Tehran possibly impact other regional threats to Israel, such as the Islamic State, Hamas, or Hezbollah? That's the question IBA's Eli Wogelenter asked of Professor Gerald Steinberg of the NGO Monitor.
Hezbollah is an Iranian client, almost a client state in terms of their base in Lebanon. And of course, Hezbollah is a sworn enemy out to destroy Israel. They don't make any secret about that. And so the question is, if there's a unity in trying to prevent the growth of ISIS and trying to promote the defeat of ISIS, because they are doing such tremendous damage in terms of just both humanitarian and the political reality in the region, how does that how does that all work out? Iran works with Hezbollah. Hezbollah wants to attack, and we just had the incidents in the north where they were trying to set up a base. Israel killed 2 of their top people, and then they retaliated. How does that all work out with the American-Iranian negotiations on nuclear issues? Where does that all fit together? And that requires a lot of consultation and cooperation. This is another case, if we look at the history since 1948, certainly since 67, where the American interests in stability, in promoting the lesser of the evils that are out here in the Middle East, economic stability too in terms of oil and access to oil. We've got Yemen now basically under Iranian control. It's hard for me to see how American interests and Israeli interests can be promoted without close cooperation. And whether or not the personal conflict between the president and the prime minister can be put aside at the working relationship. The United States needs to have the cooperation of Israel, not as much as Israel needs the cooperation of the United States, but there are those basic elements of cooperation are still going to have to be there.
But can we not say that at this point, the interests of Israel and the United States are starting to diverge on separate paths?
On these issues, I don't see that. Because the United States doesn't want Hezbollah and Iran to be the dominant powers in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, perhaps also in terms of working with Hamas, which seems to be now pushing itself back in towards the arms of Iran. All of those things are essential elements in American policy of maintaining or trying to restore a stable Middle East. The United States cannot afford to have chaos. It can't, if it spills over to Jordan, to Saudi Arabia, and the threat is very real. We saw what happened with the horrendous killing, the brutal killing of the Jordanian pilot by ISIS. And also Libya. These are all areas where the United States has to play a role. Its vital interests are at stake here, and it needs to work with Israel as the only significant stable power in the region that can actually provide assistance and cooperation. There's just no other alternative.
Turning to campaign developments and the first televised debate of its kind between the leaders of 8 parties. The heads of Abayit Yehudi, Israel Beitenu, Kulanu, Yesh Atid, Meretz, Shas, Yachad, and the United Arab List took on major and divisive issues for 2 hours on Channel 2 last night, including the 2-state solution with the Palestinians and economic matters such as the housing crisis. The 2 leading rivals for the premiership, however, ruling Prime Minister Netanyahu and Zionist Union leader Isaac Herzog, chose not to participate. Commentators described the lively discussions as being candid and frank exchanges, but for the most part found that none of the candidates could boast a clear-cut victory. Security forces captured 2 Palestinian terror cells whose members allegedly fired on IDF soldiers and civilians in the West Bank. This according to Shin Bet sources who say that the arrests were carried out during the previous 2 months in information about the operation that was released for publication yesterday. The statement didn't specify just how many suspects were taken into custody, but it did announce that weapons were also seized during the raids. According to the security service, one of the cells was located in a village near Ramallah and the other at a separate village located near Hebron. Earlier this week, the Shin Bet also busted a Hamas ring in the Hebron area, whose operatives confessed to planning a series of terror attacks against Israelis. Data released by the police reveals that there's been a recent rise in attempts to carry out attacks at checkpoints. 14 suspects attempting to commit terrorist attacks were arrested at crossings into the country last year, as opposed to just 4 in 2013. There was also a whopping 66% increase in arrests related to the discovery of weapons, an 11% rise in Palestinians caught posing as Israeli Arabs, and an 8% higher number of suspects caught illegally attempting to infiltrate the country. A cooperation agreement between Israel and Jordan has been signed to carry out the Red Dead project, meant to supply water for both countries and replenish the declining Dead Sea. Energy and Water Resources Minister Silvan Shalom inked the deal in Amman with his counterpart in the Hashemite Kingdom, Hazem Nasser, in the presence of U.S. State Department and World Bank officials yesterday. This agreement was first agreed upon in December of 2013, and the Red and the Dead Seas will ultimately be connected by a 200-kilometer-long pipeline that will bring 100 million cubic meters of water up north annually. A desalination plant will also be built at the port of Aqaba to serve both countries. A high salt water content that's left over in the desalination process is then to be streamed into the Dead Sea. The initiative's backers are hoping that it will provide an environmental solution for the Dead Sea, which has been rapidly shrinking in recent decades by some 22 meters since 1970 due to the diversion of incoming water from the Jordan River. As part of the agreement, water will also be transferred from northern Israel to Jordan. The laying of the pipeline on the Jordanian side of the shared border is expected to begin in about 3 years' time at a cost of $250 million. And construction of the desalination plant should get underway in about a year and a half. Turning to Argentina, where a federal judge has firmly dismissed allegations that the country's president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, tried to cover up the involvement of Iranian officials in the 1994 bombing of a Jewish center in Buenos Aires. The move is now easing the crisis for the government, sparked by the mysterious death of prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who brought about the case. The judge, Daniel Rafikas, who has a reputation of being a champion of civil rights and is widely respected in the Jewish community, says that the documents originally filed by Nisman failed to meet the minimal conditions necessary to launch a formal investigation by the court. He also stated that there isn't a single element of evidence, even circumstantial, implicating the head of the state. Nisman had filed the complaint just days before he died on January 18th under cloudy circumstances. While this latest decision can be appealed, the judge's scathing wording appears to substantiate the insistence by the Kirchner government that Nisman's case was baseless. Here at home, the annual Tel Aviv Marathon was halted this morning after 2 runners were hospitalized in serious condition caused by the unusually high temperatures in the coastal city. Both of the male competitors who collapsed during the race were in their 30s and required resuscitation efforts by medics before being rushed to hospital. Nearly 90 others also required treatment for less severe conditions, including heat stroke. 30,000 participants showed up at 6 o'clock this morning for the launch of the run that was supposed to have ended about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, but was instead cut short around 10. Safety regulations at the annual event have been tightened since 29-year-old Mikhailovich died during the half marathon in Tel Aviv 2 years ago. Organizers today acted on the strong recommendations issued by a committee of experts at the time and halted the race when the temperatures hit 28 degrees Celsius. And in EuroLeague action, Maccabi Tel Aviv defeated Panathinaikos 73-70 last night in a hard-fought encounter at Yad Eliyahu. The game was close throughout, and the Greeks came within a single point in the final period, but the Israelis managed to hold on to the lead with clutch free-throw shooting from Jeremy Pargo and Joe Alexander. The victory moves Maccabi into second place in the group with 6-2 record, 1 game ahead of Panathinaikos. The Greeks, however, hold the tiebreaker advantage over Tel Aviv in case that both clubs end Final 16 play with the same record because they defeated Maccabi by 7 points in Athens. Pargo led the defending champs with 16 points. Now turning to arts and entertainment, and hold on to your glitter platforms. America Disco Queen Gloria Gaynor is coming to perform on our shores this summer. The pop icon is marking the 40th year of her musical career with a show at the end of July, accompanied by backup singers and a 9-member band. The 65-year-old recording artist has released 20 studio albums and 11 collections, but there's no doubt about it. Her Grammy Award-winning song, I Will Survive, is her biggest hit and continues to be known and loved world over by all ages since its release 37 years ago.
From outer space, I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave the key. If I'd have known for just 1 second, you'd be back to bother me. Go on now, go. Walk out the door. Just turn around now. You're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye? Listen to this. Only the Lord could give me strength not to fall apart. Though I tried hard to mend the pieces of my broken heart. And I spent so many nights just feeling sorry for myself. I used to cry. But now I hold my head up high, 'cause He made me somebody new. And I'm not that chained up little person still in love with you. And so you felt like dropping in and just expecting to be free. Now I'm saving all my loving for someone who's loving me. Go on now, go.
As our satellite coordinator Yael Zelensky says, that's not a song, it's an anthem. In local finance, the shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, and due to the closure of the stock market on Fridays, here's a look at the closing numbers for the week. The IBA weather team says that this evening will be mostly clear and significantly chillier than last night. And tomorrow we'll see a further drop in temperatures, cloudy skies, and the chance of light rain. Here's the forecast at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'll be back at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. Hope to see you then. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.